The Pentagon had never felt smaller to her. From the moment she walked through the reinforced glass doors, the weight of history and authority pressed down on her chest like a steel plate. The hallways buzzed with the murmurs of high-ranking officers, their shoes clicking on polished floors in rhythms that seemed almost ceremonial, as if the building itself were announcing the arrival of power. She moved with purpose, yet deliberately silent, every step calculated, every breath measured. Her name was Major Harper Lawson, and although few outside her immediate circle recognized it, inside the classified corridors of military intelligence, it carried the quiet weight of absolute competence. Today, however, she wasn't here to be recognized. She was here to lead, and for the first time to step into a room where every eye would doubt her authority before they understood it. The briefing room doors loomed ahead, a barrier between her and the chaos she was about to inherit. Inside, the room had already taken on the kind of tension that only national crises could summon. The usual hum of computers and whispered chatter had been replaced with a heavy, expectant silence. Uniforms gleamed under the harsh fluorescent lights. Medals and ribbons caught the glare and reflected it in fragmented patterns across the walls. Men and women with decades of service stared at the empty podium at the front, their skepticism radiating in the way their hands clenched and unclenched on the table edges. She paused just outside, letting her eyes sweep across the assembled officers. She noted everything, the subtle flicker of irritation in Colonel Whitman's eyes, the barely concealed judgment on Captain Ramirez's face, and the general himself packing at the front, exuding authority like an aura of heat. He was larger than life, his presence a gravitational force that commanded attention, yet even from this distance, she could feel the cracks in his confidence. He was used to being the center of command. He had not been expecting her. With a steadying breath, she stepped forward. Her boots made only the faintest noise against the marble floor, a whisper of defiance that somehow amplified the tension in the room. Heads turned. Eyes followed. Murmurs rose like a tide, the collective curiosity of decades of military experience drawn instantly to the anomaly in their midst. A woman, alone, walking with unshakable confidence toward the center of what they considered their dominion. The general's pace faltered. A flush of surprise and perhaps irritation crossed his face. He strode to the podium, chest puffed, eyes narrowing as he tried to assess this intrusion into his meticulously ordered world. "Major Lawson," he barked before she could even speak, his voice sharp and unyielding, "report your purpose." She didn't flinch. Her posture remained straight, her expression calm, almost unreadable. "Sir," she said, her voice steady and clear, "I'm here to lead the response." A collective gasp rippled through the room. Whispers erupted in corners. She caught fragments. "Who does she think she is? She can't possibly. This isn't protocol." The general's jaw tightened. "Stand down. This briefing is under my command. You are not." But she ignored him. Ignored the barked orders, ignored the dozens of eyes glued to her, judging her every move. She walked past the podium, toward the center of the room, her hands clasping a digital tablet, the screens glowing with real-time data from multiple classified sources. Without a word, she tapped a few commands, and the room fell silent again, not in obedience but in stunned realization. The data blinked across screens in a precise, almost hypnotic rhythm. Maps highlighted points of concern across multiple theaters. Satellite feeds flickered in live view, tracking the movements of critical assets. Communication lines, previously choked with panic and mismanagement, began flowing seamlessly. Orders were being issued, acknowledged, and executed, all in less than 30 seconds. Officers shifted in their seats, eyes wide. The general's hand twitched near the edge of the podium, a visible struggle to assert authority that was slipping away with every passing heartbeat. Her voice cut through the room, calm but unyielding. "We have a window of 24 minutes before the breach becomes critical. Step aside. Follow my orders or we fail." Silence hung for a heartbeat. Then, almost imperceptibly, a nod from Colonel Whitman signaled the shift. Others followed. Orders were repeated, actions taken, decisions implemented, all under her command. The general's face turned a shade redder, veins visible in his neck as he realized he was no longer the one in control. The room moved with precision now. She orchestrated the flow of information, the routing of secure lines, the coordination of tactical response teams. Every officer present, even those who had doubted her mere presence, was now executing her directives. She didn't speak loudly. She didn't shout. Her authority came from competence, from clarity, and from an almost unnerving calm that cut through the storm of tension surrounding them. And then the first anomaly appeared on the screens. A flicker in one of the satellite feeds, a small, almost insignificant blip, but enough to make her stomach tighten. It wasn't just a technical glitch. It was deliberate. Someone was inside the system. Someone was manipulating the data, bypassing security protocols with a level of sophistication that made it clear. This was no ordinary cyber breach. She didn't flinch. Instead, her fingers moved over the tablet with rapid precision, isolating the intrusion, locking nodes, and rerouting critical communications. The general's voice rose again, a mixture of fear and anger. "Step down," I said. She finally looked at him, her eyes steady and unwavering. "Not now. If you step in, we lose control. Trust me, or get out of the way." A murmur ran through the room. Officers who had been ready to challenge her now deferred completely, understanding instinctively that she had seen what they hadn't. The breach wasn't just in the system. It was in their assumptions, their hierarchies, their very perception of command. The general's face hardened. Pride warred with necessity. He had trained officers for decades, built an empire of discipline, and now it was being overshadowed by a quiet, decisive major who had walked into the room like she owned it. He opened his mouth to argue again, but the room didn't listen. She had already begun issuing countermeasures, her tablet glowing with incoming telemetry, her commands executed with machine-like precision. Then, just as the first reports of a potential missile targeting error came through, the lights flickered violently. Phones buzzed. The digital displays wavered. A subtle alarm that no one else seemed to notice yet sounded in the background, low, ominous, almost mocking. Her eyes narrowed. This wasn't just a breach. This was an attack designed to test them, to see how fast they could react, to measure weaknesses. And somehow, she already knew it was far worse than anyone in the room could imagine. She tapped the tablet once more. Orders flowed out, reroutes implemented, teams mobilized. The room held its collective breath. The general's face was a mask of fury and disbelief. "What? How are you doing this?" he demanded, the words trembling between anger and awe. She didn't answer. She couldn't. Every second mattered. Every micro-decision carried the weight of lives, of national security, of consequences no one could yet comprehend. And as the alarm grew louder, signaling the first tangible manifestation of the threat, she realized that her greatest challenge wasn't the breach. It was the room full of officers who had yet to accept that she was, in this moment, truly in command. And then, just as the tension reached its apex, a warning blared on the main console. A single line of code, blinking in red, flashing across the screens like a harbinger of chaos. Someone had initiated the first stage of a catastrophic protocol, and the countdown had begun. For a moment the room went still. No one moved, not even the general. All eyes were on her, and she smiled just slightly, a calm, controlled smile that promised action, precision, and an unwavering resolve. Because in this moment, Major Harper Lawson knew one thing with absolute certainty. The real battle had just begun. The alarm's shrill cry echoed through the Pentagon like a banshee, rattling even the most seasoned officers. Screens flickered as red zones spiked across global maps, each one marking a breach, a vulnerability, a potential disaster. The room that had moments ago been tense with anticipation now erupted into controlled chaos. Voices overlapped, phones rang, and data scrolled faster than any human eye could read. Major Harper Lawson stood at the center, her calm a sharp contrast to the storm. Her fingers danced across her tablet, her eyes scanning lines of code and satellite feeds with unnerving speed. Each command she issued was precise, executed immediately by her team. Orders cascaded from her like a conductor leading an orchestra, and slowly, the room began to move as one. The general, flushed and furious, barked over the cacophony. "Stand down! Step aside, Major! You are not in command!" His voice cracked under the strain, reverberating against the concrete walls. She didn't flinch. Instead, she spoke with quiet authority, her words cutting through the noise like a scalpel. "If I step down, we fail. Follow my orders, now." Colonel Whitman hesitated, then obeyed, signaling others to do the same. Even the general had to pause, realizing he was no longer the one orchestrating the defense. The breach itself was sophisticated beyond anything she had encountered. Multiple nodes were being attacked simultaneously, each one critical to the nation's satellite network. She watched a live feed of the missile defense system, noting the spikes in unusual activity. Someone, somewhere, was testing their limits, probing weaknesses, and exploiting every opening. A junior officer leaned toward her. "Major, the communication lines are being overridden. We're losing control of the satellite arrays." She didn't respond immediately. Her mind raced, calculating probabilities, prioritizing threats. Then, without hesitation, she issued a series of rapid-fire commands. Secure reroutes activated, drones were repositioned, and countermeasures engaged. Slowly, the red zones on the maps began to stabilize, shrinking like an ebbing tide. The general's face contorted in disbelief. How are you doing this?" Her gaze didn't leave the screens. "Because panic isn't a strategy," she said softly. Her words were calm, almost gentle, but beneath them lay steel. "Focus, act, execute." The first real test came almost immediately. One of the satellites suddenly veered off its programmed trajectory, flashing a warning of potential missile misfires. The team froze, looking toward her for direction. Harper's mind processed the variables in milliseconds: the satellite's velocity, trajectory corrections, orbital mechanics, potential fallout. She issued a corrective maneuver, manually overriding the automated system. The screens blinked, the numbers adjusted, and the missile's trajectory realigned. Relief swept briefly through the room, but it was short-lived. Another alert sounded. This time it was different. Someone had accessed the control system from inside the Pentagon itself. Her heart didn't race, but her senses sharpened. "We have an insider," she announced, her voice calm yet commanding. Heads turned toward her, eyes wide with disbelief. The general stiffened, clearly unnerved by the revelation. A sense of tension gripped the room. Officers whispered among themselves. Who could be trusted? Who was compromised? Every movement now held weight, every gesture carried suspicion. Harper didn't allow herself to falter. She methodically scanned the personnel present, reading micro-expressions, detecting hesitation, noting signs of stress. "Lock down all internal systems," she ordered. "Verify every access point. No one leaves or enters without my approval. Now." Security teams moved immediately, following her directives. The general opened his mouth to argue but caught himself. Her command was absolute, undeniable, and necessary. As Harper worked, another anomaly appeared on her tablet. Lines of code she hadn't seen before blinked red, moving at a speed almost impossible to track. She realized with a jolt, the breach wasn't random. It was intelligent, adaptive, designed to evolve faster than human intervention could respond. Whoever was behind it wasn't just skilled, they were anticipating every move. She tapped a command that initiated a counter-algorithm she had designed but never deployed in a live scenario. Screens blinked, numbers cascaded like falling rain, and the red lines of the breach began to dissipate slightly. The room exhaled collectively. Then came a voice through the secure line, one she didn't recognize. "You think you've stopped it. You haven't seen the half of it." The words made the hairs on her arms stand on end. It wasn't a taunt, it was a declaration of intent. The breach wasn't just digital, it was personal. Someone had orchestrated this, and they knew she was the one in command. The general stepped closer, trying to reclaim his dominance. "Major Lawson," he said, voice low but tense, "if this isn't under my control, we're all in danger. Step aside now." Harper's eyes flicked to him, and for the first time the air between them crackled, not with mutual respect but with challenge. "Sir," she said evenly, "you are the highest-ranking officer, yes, but authority without action is meaningless. I am acting. Follow my orders or we fail together." The general's face reddened further. He opened his mouth, but the sound of a distant explosion interrupted him, a warning from one of the compromised nodes. The lights flickered briefly, and a subtle tremor ran through the room. Everyone froze. The crisis had just escalated. Harper didn't pause. She analyzed the explosion data, cross-referenced it with satellite feeds, and identified the source: a hidden access point inside the Pentagon itself. Someone had bypassed the most secure encryption layers to trigger an external threat. Her voice cut through the tension like a blade. "We have less than 20 minutes before a critical system fails. Identify the insider, lock down all nodes, deploy mobile security units to every floor. Now." Teams moved with military precision, guided by her instructions. Phones buzzed with incoming data, security cameras pinged, and officers executed her orders without hesitation. The general watched, jaw clenched, as Harper orchestrated a counter-response faster than any system protocol could automatically handle. Then the first casualty of the breach manifested. A missile targeting simulation flagged a potential misfire over a populated area. Panic flickered across the faces of those present. Harper didn't flinch. She calculated, rerouted, and neutralized the threat with a series of precise commands. The missile's trajectory corrected, landing harmlessly in a remote testing zone. Relief surged briefly, but Harper's mind didn't allow for celebration. The breach wasn't over. Whoever was behind this had anticipated every countermeasure, and the mole inside the Pentagon had yet to act fully. She glanced at the general. He was pale, his authority stripped away, forced into a corner by a major half his age. She met his eyes, her calm unwavering. "This isn't personal, sir. It's operational. Follow my lead or step aside and watch failure unfold." The general's lips pressed into a thin line. He nodded, albeit reluctantly. The team, unified under Harper's command, moved as a single, synchronized unit, calm in the eye of the storm, driven by precision and the quiet authority of a woman who refused to be intimidated. Then the lights flickered again, longer this time. Phones went dead, screens blinked, and a chilling realization swept the room. The mole had triggered a secondary protocol. Harper's eyes narrowed. She could feel it in her gut. The real danger was only beginning. The cyber breach was no longer just about systems. It was about control, trust, and survival. And somewhere in the Pentagon, a person trained, skilled, and determined to sabotage them all was moving toward the next stage of chaos. Her lips pressed together, a tight line of focus and resolve. She didn't speak. She didn't panic. She acted. The countdown had begun, and the race against time was now more than digital. It was personal, it was physical, and it was deadly. And as the room plunged into tension deeper than it had ever known, Harper Lawson realized the full scale of the challenge ahead. The breach wasn't just a threat, it was a test, and she was the only one capable of passing it. The Pentagon's emergency lights cast long, ominous shadows across the polished floors. The chaos of the breach had intensified, and the officers in the briefing room now moved like shadows themselves, uncertain, tense, aware that the enemy was no longer just out there. It was here, inside their fortress. Major Harper Lawson stood at the center, her fingers moving across her tablet, her mind calculating, predicting, and preempting moves that no one else could see. She knew the breach was sophisticated, but this insider threat was personal. Whoever it was had intimate knowledge of the Pentagon's systems, its security protocols, its weak points. And the mole's confidence told her one thing: they believed they were untouchable. She scanned the room, eyes sharp and calculating. The officers shifted uncomfortably under her gaze. The general paced at the front, growing more agitated with every passing second. He had authority and rank, but here, in the face of a living, breathing crisis, it was useless without action, and Harper had action in spades. Then she saw it: subtle movement, a tremor of anxiety in one officer who had been otherwise calm, a nervous tick, a slight hesitation when responding to a call. Harper's eyes narrowed. She approached, her steps silent, her presence commanding attention. "Captain Reynolds," she said, her voice soft, measured, but carrying an unmistakable edge. "Follow me, please." The officer's eyes widened. "Major, I." "Now," she interrupted, her gaze unwavering. Reynolds followed, sweating, his hand trembling as he held a secure communications tablet. Harper led him to a side room, away from the chaos, and closed the door behind them. The air was thick, charged with tension. "Captain," she began, eyes locked on his, "we both know someone here is sabotaging the system, and I know you're involved." Reynolds staggered back, incredulous. You can't know that. I was just following orders." Harper's expression didn't change. "Orders? You were sending codes to an unknown source. You know what that means. You're endangering lives, national security, and everything we've worked for. Do you understand that?" His lips quivered. "I didn't know who it was. I was forced. They said they'd kill my family if I didn't cooperate." Harper's mind raced. She had anticipated resistance, but this was worse than she had imagined. A human compromised, manipulated, terrified, but still dangerous. Every second they hesitated could cost lives. "Calm down," she said, softening slightly. "You're still useful, but only if you cooperate fully. Any further deception, any hesitation, and you're a liability. Do you understand?" Reynolds swallowed hard, nodding. Yes, Major, I'll do whatever you say." Harper tapped the tablet, initiating a lockdown on his access codes. "You'll tell me everything. Every terminal you touched, every message you sent, every command you executed. And you'll do it now. Time is critical." He nodded, rattling off passwords, command sequences, and secure lines he had compromised. Harper cross-referenced each piece of information against the live data flooding her screens. Slowly, a clearer picture emerged. The mole's reach extended farther than she had thought, touching not just satellite communications but tactical operations, missile guidance systems, and even physical security protocols inside the Pentagon itself. The general's voice cut through the room via the intercom, sharp and furious. "Major Lawson, what's happening? Why isn't this under my control?" Harper didn't respond immediately. She tapped a few commands, isolating the sections of the system the mole had corrupted. "Sir," she said finally, her voice steady, "we have an insider. They've been manipulating systems in real time. I'm handling it. Follow my directives or we all fail." The general's silence spoke volumes. He was furious but powerless to argue. She had taken control and he knew it. Suddenly, a subtle beep drew her attention to the main console. Another anomaly. Someone was attempting to access the classified missile launch protocol from inside the Pentagon. Her eyes narrowed. This was no longer just digital manipulation. It was physical. Someone had bypassed internal security and was attempting to escalate the breach to a potential launch scenario. She didn't waste time. "Deploy mobile security teams to all sensitive areas," she ordered. "Lock down all access points and trace this attempt immediately. I want real-time movement data now." Her team executed flawlessly, moving like a single organism, guided by her unerring focus. But Harper knew the mole was clever. Whoever it was had studied the Pentagon's security systems extensively. They had anticipated every basic countermeasure. The question wasn't if she could stop them. It was whether she could anticipate the next move before it was too late. And then the mole revealed themselves in the most subtle, horrifying way. Harper noticed a reflection in one of the glass panels across the room, a figure moving toward the server racks with precision. Their movement was confident, controlled, practiced, not a hint of hesitation. "Get a visual on the intruder," she snapped into her tablet. Security feeds flickered. The figure appeared, a high-ranking officer, familiar to everyone, trusted by the Pentagon elite. The room collectively held its breath as the feed displayed the intruder manipulating the server racks with surgical precision. Harper's heart didn't race, but her jaw tightened. This was someone brilliant, someone dangerous, someone willing to risk everything. And now they were inside the very heart of the Pentagon, executing the next phase of the plan. She turned to the general, her eyes steady. "Sir, the mole is on site. They have physical access. Evacuation protocols will compromise the countermeasures. I need unrestricted authority to intercept them." He opened his mouth, then closed it. The realization hit him like a punch. She was right. Authority without action was meaningless. And right now, her action was the only thing standing between the Pentagon and catastrophe. Harper grabbed a secure tablet and began coordinating two teams, one to isolate the intruder, another to protect critical systems. She issued detailed, step-by-step commands, her mind a whirlwind of calculations, probabilities, and contingencies. The teams moved like shadows, silent but deadly, weaving through corridors and stairwells. The intruder, unaware they had been detected, continued their work. Every second mattered. Harper calculated distance, timing, and response. She needed precision. Any mistake could trigger the compromised systems, turning the Pentagon into a live battlefield. "Major," Colonel Whitman whispered, voice trembling slightly, "they're heading toward the central console, if they reach it." "I know," Harper interrupted, eyes locked on the movement feed. "They won't." Her fingers flew over the tablet. One team would intercept from the north corridor, the other from the south. A coordinated pincer, executed with flawless timing. As the teams moved into position, the intruder's pace quickened. Harper held her breath, not literally, but mentally. Every microsecond counted. She adjusted the intercept vectors in real time, ensuring that no step would be miscalculated. Then a sudden click echoed across the feed. The intruder had reached for the emergency override. Harper's stomach tightened. One wrong move and the entire system could go live, launching assets she couldn't yet predict. She tapped the tablet with laser precision. "Now," she commanded. Security teams converged. The intruder spun, gun drawn. A tense standoff erupted, seconds stretching into what felt like eternity. Harper watched through the feed, her mind calculating trajectories, angles, potential outcomes. The intruder hesitated just for a heartbeat. That was all Harper needed. A team member lunged, disarming the officer with a swift, practiced motion. The intruder fell to the floor, cuffed but not unconscious. Harper knew better than to underestimate them. She exhaled, but only slightly. This wasn't over. The insider had been neutralized for now, but their plan had already set wheels in motion that Harper could only begin to unravel. The general finally spoke, voice quiet, almost reverent. I didn't know." Harper didn't look at him. Her eyes returned to the screens, analyzing data, scanning for secondary threats, plotting next moves. "Sir," she said calmly, "we're not safe yet. This breach is far from over. The real challenge is just beginning." Outside the briefing room, somewhere in the shadows, another figure moved. A silent observer, someone watching the chaos unfold, learning, waiting. Harper's mind recognized the pattern instantly. This was bigger than one insider. This was orchestrated, and the enemy was still inside the walls. Her lips pressed into a thin line. She wasn't afraid. Not yet. Fear was a luxury she couldn't afford. Because in this room, at this moment, Major Harper Lawson was the only thing standing between order and complete catastrophe. And she intended to see it through, no matter the cost. The air in the Pentagon briefing room had transformed into something almost tangible, thick with tension, charged with fear, yet alive with the pulse of calculated precision. Every officer present moved with a careful deliberation, each aware that a single misstep could ignite catastrophe. Major Harper Lawson stood at the center, eyes locked on multiple screens, hands flying over her tablet, her mind racing faster than any of the people around her could comprehend. She was no longer just responding to a threat. She was orchestrating the defense of the nation, minute by minute, command by command. The general's presence, once an unassailable authority, now felt almost like an intrusion. He paced behind Harper, his polished boots echoing off the marble floors, his face flushed with anger and frustration. "Major Lawson," he barked, his voice trembling with the edges of panic. "You are overstepping your authority. Stand down. I am in command here." Harper didn't flinch. She didn't even glance at him. Her eyes were glued to the streams of live data cascading across her tablet, each red alert a heartbeat of impending disaster. "Sir," she said calmly, without raising her voice, "command without action is meaningless. Follow my orders or step aside and watch everything collapse." A murmur ran through the officers, some shocked by her audacity, others silently relieved to have someone decisive in control. Harper didn't need consensus. She needed action, and her calm authority now overrode the general's decades of hierarchical power. Then came the next alert, an incoming satellite anomaly. One of the nation's missile defense satellites was drifting off course, triggered remotely from an unknown source. The potential for disaster was immediate, and any delay could have catastrophic consequences. Harper calculated the trajectory in seconds, her brain moving faster than even the most advanced AI systems on the network. "Redirect interceptors," she commanded. "Activate fail-safes. Isolate that node immediately, and prepare the countermeasure protocol Delta." The officers moved like automatons under her precise directions, their training finally aligning perfectly with her genius. The general barked an objection, but even he recognized the inevitability of her authority when he saw the data, flashing, red, impossible to ignore. Minutes stretched into an eternity as the team executed Harper's commands. The satellite corrected its trajectory, narrowly missing a populated zone, a potential disaster averted by mere meters. Relief swept briefly through the room, but Harper didn't allow herself to celebrate. She knew better than anyone that the mole wasn't finished. The general's face contorted with disbelief and fury. "How are you doing this?" he demanded, his voice a mix of awe and humiliation. "You don't have the clearance for half of what you're executing." Harper's eyes flicked to him briefly, unyielding. "Clearance doesn't save lives, sir. Strategy does. If we fail, rank doesn't matter. Follow my orders or step aside." His jaw tightened, veins standing out on his forehead. He wanted to argue, to assert the authority he had spent decades building, but this was no ordinary scenario. Lives were at stake, and Harper's calm decisiveness was the only thing preventing total chaos. Suddenly, a junior officer ran to the main console, pale and sweating. "Major Lawson," he stammered, "the intruder. They're attempting to access missile launch controls from the central hub. If they succeed..." Harper's mind raced. The mole's reach was deeper than she had imagined. It wasn't just cyber systems. They had physical access to the Pentagon's core operations, and the clock was ticking, counting down to potential disaster. She tapped her tablet furiously, deploying a second team of security officers to intercept the intruder. "Coordinate with the first team. North corridor, south corridor. Seal exits. Prevent access at all costs. I want full surveillance on every corridor, every door, every movement." The general barked again, trying to regain control. "Major Lawson, you cannot." She cut him off, voice sharper now, cutting through the chaos. "Sir, every second you hesitate increases risk. I am in command of this operation. Follow my orders or we fail. That is the reality of this room right now." His eyes widened with a grudging acknowledgement, and he stepped back, allowing her authority to dominate. The room shifted, the officers moving seamlessly under Harper's command, the tension coalescing into a focused, deadly efficiency. Then the first real sign of resistance arrived. A secure terminal beeped urgently, signaling unauthorized access. Harper's eyes narrowed as she cross-referenced the IP signature. It matched no known device inside the Pentagon. Someone was on the network physically, somewhere inside the building. She calculated. There was only one possible explanation. The mole was moving unseen into position. If they reached the central console, the consequences would be catastrophic. She tapped her tablet again, issuing orders that were almost surgical in their precision. Block corridors, seal floors, reroute camera feeds, and position mobile response units strategically. Seconds later, the security teams reported their first encounter. The intruder was heavily armed, moving with precision, trained, confident. Harper's stomach didn't tighten, but her focus sharpened. This was no longer a digital battle. It was physical, personal, deadly. She directed her teams via encrypted channels, coordinating every move, every step. North Corridor team, intercept, but don't engage unless necessary. South Corridor team, cover exits and prevent access to restricted areas. Meanwhile, Harper monitored the central system, ready to cut off power to the consoles if the intruder reached them. The general watched in stunned silence, realizing that all the authority he had accumulated over decades meant nothing in the face of Harper's capability. His face was red, his hands trembling slightly as he tried to keep pace with the commands streaming across the screens. Then came the first confrontation. One of the security teams cornered the intruder in a dimly lit corridor. Harper watched the live feed, analyzing angles, timing, and potential outcomes. The intruder hesitated just for a fraction of a second, but it was enough. A security officer moved in, disarming the intruder with a fluid, practiced motion. The officer went down, and Harper's heart remained steady. Her focus returned to the tablet, tracking potential secondary threats. The mole's operation was multi-layered, sophisticated, and dangerous. Harper knew they had planted contingencies in multiple systems. One misstep could trigger a chain reaction that would dwarf anything they had faced so far. The general finally spoke, voice low and almost reverent. "Major Lawson, how are you seeing all of this? How are you calculating every move?" Harper didn't answer directly. She simply tapped her tablet, isolating compromised nodes, rerouting commands, and neutralizing potential threats before they could manifest. Her authority wasn't just in her rank. It was in her precision, her foresight, her ability to act decisively when everyone else froze. Another alarm sounded, more insidious than before. A secondary breach had been detected. Someone was attempting to access secure communications, potentially compromising not just defense systems, but intelligence assets worldwide. Harper's jaw tightened. The mole's plan was larger than she had anticipated, and the room's stakes had escalated beyond anything they could have imagined. "North Corridor team," she said calmly, issuing orders with a clarity that brooked no argument, "intercept the intruder. South Corridor team, cover all exits and prevent any further access to critical systems. Central Command, initiate lockdown on all secure networks. Move now." The teams executed flawlessly, their movements synchronized like a single organism under Harper's guidance. The intruder was contained, but the threat wasn't neutralized. They had activated secondary systems designed to continue the attack even if they were captured. Harper's eyes flicked to the general. His expression was a mixture of awe, disbelief, and reluctant respect. She met his gaze steadily. "Sir," she said quietly, "this room survives because someone had to act decisively. Rank alone won't save us. I am in command." He swallowed hard. For the first time in his career, he understood that authority without action was meaningless. And in this moment, Major Harper Lawson wasn't just in command. She was the only person standing between the Pentagon and catastrophe. Outside the briefing room, somewhere in the building, the mole continued their operation. Harper's mind anticipated their every move, calculating possibilities, probabilities, and potential outcomes. She wasn't afraid. Not yet. Fear was a luxury she couldn't afford. Because in this room, at this moment, precision, foresight, and unyielding calm were the only weapons between order and total disaster. And Harper Lawson had them all. As she tapped a final series of commands, locking down the last compromised systems and positioning her teams for the next move, she knew one thing with absolute certainty. The battle was far from over. The mole's plan was still in motion, and the next decision could cost lives. The room was tense, the general humbled, and the officers aware that they were witnessing something extraordinary. Harper's calm authority cut through the chaos, a lighthouse in a storm that threatened to engulf them all. And then, without warning, a new alert flashed on the main console. A secondary breach had been activated. The countdown had begun. Harper's lips pressed into a thin line. The true test of her command was just beginning. The Pentagon had transformed into a battlefield of shadows, lights, and digital chaos. Every screen flickered with warnings. Every officer moved with a mix of fear and determination. Major Harper Lawson's calm in the center of the storm was almost surreal. She didn't flinch as alarms screamed across the room, as red lines blinked violently on the maps, or as the general's frustrated shouts cut through the tension. "Major Lawson," the general barked again, his voice hoarse. "This situation is spiraling. You have no authority over." "Authority won't save lives, sir," Harper interrupted, her voice steady, slicing through the clamor like a blade. "Action does. Follow my orders or get out of the way." The officers, who moments ago had been hesitant, now moved with precision. Security teams dispersed to corridors, technicians rerouted critical systems, and communications specialists isolated compromised nodes. Every movement was calculated under Harper's direction, orchestrated with the precision of a conductor leading a symphony, each note perfectly timed. And the threat wasn't waiting. The mole had activated secondary protocols, triggering a cascade of potential failures across multiple systems. One of the satellites linked to the missile defense network had gone offline, and her tablet flashed with the unmistakable signs of an impending catastrophe. "Satellite 5 is unstable," she said, almost to herself. Her fingers flew over the tablet, pulling up real-time telemetry. "Trajectory is off by 0.02 degrees, enough to cause collateral damage if not corrected immediately. Prepare interceptors and reroute orbital corrections." Colonel Whitman leaned over her shoulder. "Major, if we're off by even a fraction more, it could." "It won't be," she interrupted sharply. There was no room for doubt, only action. Her calculations were already executing a countermeasure algorithm she had prepared months ago for scenarios exactly like this. It was risky, borderline improvisational, but she had no other choice. As the algorithm began to run, a ripple of alarms erupted from another terminal. A missile guidance system had been tampered with, its trajectory now pointing dangerously close to an unpopulated area, but not far enough to prevent disaster if it wasn't corrected. The room froze for a fraction of a second. Then Harper's calm voice directed the teams with machine-like precision. "Team Alpha, engage intercept sequence. Team Bravo, secure secondary guidance systems. Central Control, override missile feed with backup protocol Delta. Move, now." Minutes felt like hours as the teams executed her commands. The satellite's trajectory corrected, the missile feed realigned, and the red alerts on the map slowly diminished. Relief swept briefly through the room, but Harper didn't allow herself to celebrate. She knew the mole wasn't finished. The general's face had gone pale. He opened his mouth to speak, but then closed it, realizing that Harper's decisions had just prevented a disaster he would have struggled to avert in hours, if not days. She had assumed control, and she had executed flawlessly. Then came the next escalation. Harper's tablet pinged an alert that made her stomach tighten. A secure access point deep within the Pentagon was being manipulated again, this time with alarming speed. Someone was attempting to override not just systems, but the very protocols she had put in place to prevent disaster. "Secondary breach detected in the south wing," she said, her eyes narrowing. "They're moving faster than expected. We need to isolate it before it spreads to critical infrastructure." She tapped a command, rerouting surveillance feeds, locking doors remotely, and deploying additional security units. But as she scanned the live feeds, her heart skipped a beat. The mole was not just moving, they were anticipating her moves. They had studied her patterns, her timing, her responses. Every second was a test of speed, intellect, and nerve. "Major," Whitman whispered, voice tense, "they're trying to override the command node. If they succeed—" "I know," Harper interrupted, her focus unbroken. "But we're not letting that happen. I want full visual coverage of every corridor leading to that node. Deploy drones if necessary. Cut off all exits. I need them contained before they touch anything critical." Security teams moved with urgency, responding to her commands with seamless precision. But Harper could see the subtle signals of resistance. A door that should have locked lagged a fraction. A camera feed briefly went dark. Someone somewhere was working against them, and the clock was ticking. Seconds became critical. Harper's mind ran faster than her hands could move, predicting potential failures, calculating contingencies, rerouting systems, and issuing orders simultaneously. The room moved under her command like a living organism, every individual aware that a single mistake could trigger catastrophe. Then came the visual confirmation. The mole was in position, approaching the central console. Harper's stomach tightened, not with fear but with focus. She had anticipated this, and she had already calculated multiple interception strategies. "North Corridor Team," she commanded, "intercept now. South Corridor Team, cover all exits and prevent any further access to the node. Central Control, prepare to cut power to compromised terminals on my mark. Do not hesitate." The teams moved instantly, converging on the mole with precision timing. Harper's eyes flicked between the live feeds, her tablet, and the data streams. Everything had to be perfect. The mole reached for the console. Harper's mind calculated the split-second movement and issued the command. "Now." Security officers lunged from both directions. The intruder spun, gun drawn, but Harper had already anticipated it. The disarm sequence was executed flawlessly. The mole fell, cuffed, and neutralized. Harper's heart rate remained steady, her focus unbroken. The room exhaled collectively. The immediate threat was contained, but Harper knew better than anyone that the mole's operation was multi-layered. They had set contingencies in motion, secondary breaches designed to continue even after they were captured. She tapped her tablet again, initiating a counter-algorithm that neutralized these secondary systems. Numbers cascaded across the screen, systems rerouted, and the red alerts slowly turned green. The Pentagon system stabilized, but the tension in the room did not. The general, finally able to speak, said quietly, almost reverently, "Major Lawson, how are you doing all of this?" Harper didn't answer directly. Her eyes scanned the screens, calculating the next potential threat. Because if we don't act decisively, people die. Authority without action means nothing. And right now, action is everything. Another alert flashed, smaller but no less ominous. Someone was attempting to access secure communications remotely. Harper realized instantly. The mole had accomplices outside. The operation wasn't finished. The threat extended beyond the Pentagon's walls, potentially affecting assets worldwide. Her jaw tightened. She didn't panic. She couldn't. She tapped a series of commands, activating global lockdown protocols, rerouting sensitive communications, and alerting allied networks to potential infiltration. Every move was precise, every decision calculated, every second critical. The room held its collective breath, watching her orchestrate the defense of national security in real time. Officers who had doubted her mere presence now deferred completely, executing her orders without hesitation. The general, humbled and awed, could only observe as Harper Lawson moved like a force of nature, calm and unyielding in the eye of a storm that threatened to engulf them all. Outside the building, in the shadows, Harper could feel the presence of the larger operation still in motion, a network of threats, a calculated enemy watching, waiting, testing their limits. The countdowns, the alerts, the flashing screens, they were signals of a far larger game. Harper's lips pressed into a thin line. She didn't allow herself fear, only focus. The mole had been neutralized, but the battle was far from over. Every system stabilized, every threat contained for now. But she knew the enemy would strike again, smarter, faster, and deadlier. Because the true test of her command had only just begun. And Harper Lawson was ready. The Pentagon was tense, a fortress on high alert. Every light, every screen, every alarm was a warning signal, a heartbeat of danger. The room had stabilized after the mole's capture, but Major Harper Lawson knew better than anyone that the crisis was far from over. She could feel it, the invisible presence of the operation still active, still watching, still planning its next move. The general hovered near the edge of the room, a mixture of awe, frustration, and disbelief etched across his face. Harper didn't look at him. Her eyes were fixed on the screens, scanning feeds, analyzing telemetry, cross-referencing every alert, every anomaly. There were patterns here that spoke of a far larger plan, one that extended beyond the walls of the Pentagon, one that threatened to destabilize national security on a scale few could even imagine. "Major," Whitman said quietly, leaning over her shoulder, "what's next? We've contained the mole, corrected the satellite trajectory, neutralized the missile threat. Are we?" "Not yet," Harper interrupted. Her voice was calm, but every syllable carried authority. "Containment isn't victory. Every system stabilized is temporary. There's an accomplice, someone outside, coordinating, observing. They're testing our response, probing for weaknesses." The general's eyes narrowed. "You mean another breach, another threat we haven't detected?" Harper didn't answer immediately. Instead, she tapped her tablet, bringing up network logs, encrypted transmissions, and satellite feeds. "They're using multiple channels," she explained. "Not just digital, physical, psychological. They're observing us, learning how we react, adapting faster than our protocols allow. And if we don't anticipate their next move, the consequences will be catastrophic." Suddenly, an alert blared on the secure communications network. The voice on the other end was distorted, mechanical, almost taunting. "You think you've won," it said, chilling in its certainty. "But you're playing into our hands. The real game begins now." Harper's eyes narrowed. This wasn't just a breach. This was a challenge, a provocation. The accomplice wasn't just testing the Pentagon's defenses, they were testing her, Major Harper Lawson. "Lock all secure lines," she ordered. "Deploy surveillance drones to all exterior perimeters. Monitor communications for anomalies. Activate real-time predictive analytics on every access point." Her fingers flew across the tablet, executing commands faster than anyone in the room could process. Officers moved with precision, responding to her directives as if she were an extension of the Pentagon itself. The general watched, pale and humbled, as Harper orchestrated a defense far beyond anything he had expected from a single officer. Then came the next threat. A sudden spike in activity was detected in one of the lesser-known communication hubs deep in the Pentagon. Harper's eyes tracked it instantly. The intruder was attempting a coordinated attack on a secondary system, a hidden protocol designed to override backups if the primary nodes were compromised. "South Wing now," she barked, directing security teams toward the hub. "Contain it before it escalates. No mistakes. Neutralize any threats. Repeat, neutralize." The teams moved swiftly, but Harper knew this wasn't just about brute force. The accomplice was clever, anticipating moves, predicting responses, and countering strategies before they could be executed. This was a battle of intellect, timing, and nerves. Every decision had to be perfect. Seconds later, a subtle vibration ran through the room, a signal she had been monitoring quietly. Someone had bypassed one of the internal cameras, moving with stealth and purpose toward a secure exit. Harper's pulse didn't quicken, but her mind locked onto the anomaly immediately. "They're inside," she said, voice calm but urgent. "They've deployed someone in the building. Prepare interception, track every corridor, block all access points, use visual and thermal feeds. No mistakes." The general's face turned ashen. "Inside, you mean another agent here now?" Harper didn't respond. There was no time for argument. Every second counted. She orchestrated teams to converge on potential escape routes while simultaneously monitoring systems for secondary threats. The intruder's pattern was subtle, almost invisible, but Harper's instincts, honed through years of experience, caught it instantly. Then the feed from one of the corner cameras confirmed it. A figure, moving swiftly, carrying a device that could compromise the central console. Harper's breath remained steady, but her mind raced. This wasn't just sabotage. This was an attempt to regain control, to destabilize the Pentagon from within while the mole's external accomplice coordinated from afar. "Intercept now," she ordered. "Move silently. No engagement until they reach the secondary node. Cameras maintain visual coverage. Track every step. Report anomalies immediately." Security teams moved, silent shadows against the stark fluorescent lights. Harper's eyes flicked between the feeds, anticipating every angle, every potential move. She calculated the probability of interception, predicting trajectories, timing, and possible countermeasures the intruder might deploy. Then came a sudden alarm. A locked door had been forced. The intruder was in motion faster than predicted. Harper's jaw tightened. "North Corridor team, adjust intercept vector. South Corridor, contain any possible escape. Engage now if necessary." A tense silence descended on the room, punctuated only by the soft hum of technology and the faint beeping of alerts. Officers held their breath, following her commands with almost religious precision. The general's face was pale, his hands trembling slightly. Harper's calm, unwavering presence had become the anchor in a storm of uncertainty. Through the live feed, Harper could see the intruder approaching the central node, their movements deliberate, precise. Every micro-movement was calculated. This was no random agent. This was a trained professional, someone who understood the systems as well as she did. She tapped a sequence on her tablet, initiating a lockdown on the secondary node. The intruder froze mid-step, momentarily halted by the sudden restriction. Harper seized the moment. "Engage," she commanded. The security team moved with surgical precision, surrounding the intruder, cutting off all escape routes. The intruder attempted to resist, but the team, trained under Harper's guidance, neutralized them efficiently. The device was secured, the threat contained for now. Harper exhaled, but only slightly. Her eyes scanned the room, back to the feeds, back to the network logs. This was just one layer of a much larger operation. The mole had been captured, the internal agent neutralized, but the accomplice outside remained at large. Their plan was still in motion. The general approached her cautiously. "Major Lawson, you've done something extraordinary. I don't know if I've ever seen anyone coordinate a defense like this. Ever." Harper didn't smile. She tapped a few final commands, securing the building, stabilizing compromised nodes, and rerouting critical communications. "Sir," she said, voice calm but firm, "we've contained the immediate threats, but the operation isn't over. They're still out there, and they'll strike again. We need to anticipate, predict, and neutralize before the next move." A tense silence filled the room as officers processed her words. Harper's calm authority had shifted the dynamics completely. No one questioned her judgment anymore. They trusted her. The general, humbled and awed, deferred to her command. Outside the building, Harper knew someone was watching, waiting, calculating. The accomplice had seen the mole neutralized, had observed her strategies, and would adapt. The game was far from over. Harper pressed her lips together. Fear was useless. Panic was worse. She relied on her intellect, her training, and her unyielding focus. Every system secured, every threat contained, every move anticipated. This was the only way to survive the next phase. Because she knew the truth, the one fact that gave her an edge the enemy didn't anticipate. Harper Lawson was not just a major. She was a strategist, a tactician, a force that could anticipate threats faster than they could adapt. And she would not fail. The countdown was over, but the war had only just begun. The Pentagon hummed with an uneasy tension, the kind that made the hairs on Harper Lawson's arms rise despite her unshakable composure. For hours, she had orchestrated defenses, neutralized threats, and outmaneuvered the mole and their internal accomplice. But she knew, instinctively, that the real danger was still out there, outside the building, beyond the cameras, beyond the screens. Someone was watching, waiting, calculating. Someone who had planned this entire operation like a chess master, and now intended to make their final move. Harper's eyes scanned the live feeds, her mind simultaneously tracking every team in the building, every system online, every potential breach. She could feel the anticipation like a living thing, pulsing through the circuits and corridors of the Pentagon. Every officer present had fallen silent, trusting her judgment, hanging on her every command. Even the general, once a symbol of authority, now hovered at the edges of the room, silent and deferential. Then a sudden alarm shattered the fragile calm. A secondary breach, not digital, not internal, but physical. A blast-resistant door in the West Wing had been compromised, and security cameras showed a figure moving with extraordinary speed toward the central command hub. Harper's stomach tightened, not with fear but with awareness. This was no ordinary intruder. This was precise, trained, and deadly. "West Wing breach," she announced, her voice calm but cutting through the tension like steel. "Team Delta, intercept immediately. Do not engage unless necessary. Central Command, prepare lockdown protocols. No one exits until I say so." The security teams moved with military precision, their training heightened by Harper's clear, unflinching guidance. Every move she ordered was executed flawlessly, yet she knew the intruder was intelligent, anticipating reactions, adapting faster than any of her teams could predict. This was the culmination, the final test. Harper's fingers flew across her tablet. Every camera feed, every access point, every movement vector was analyzed and recalculated in real time. She could almost predict the intruder's next step before they even moved, a terrifyingly precise intuition born of years of training and instinct. Then the voice came over the secure line, distorted but unmistakable. "You've done well, Major Lawson, too well, but this ends tonight." Harper's eyes narrowed. The accomplice had initiated the final phase. This wasn't just sabotage, it was war, inside the very heart of the Pentagon. "Deploy all available drones to visual range," she ordered. "Lock all secondary exits. No one moves without my authorization." The teams moved silently, shadows against the stark lights of the corridors. Harper watched every screen, every data feed, every micro-movement. And then she saw it. The intruder had split from their original path, taking a side route she hadn't anticipated. A calculated deviation. The accomplice was clever, adaptive, and ruthless. "Team Delta, adjust intercept vector," she said, eyes flicking between the live feeds. "South corridor, cover the secondary node. North corridor, prepare containment. This ends now." Seconds stretched like hours. The intruder moved with inhuman precision, reaching for a secondary control panel, attempting to override Harper's lockdown protocols. Every command, every action had to be perfect. One mistake, One miscalculation and the entire Pentagon, and potentially the nation, was at risk. Harper's mind raced. She calculated timing, angles, probabilities, contingencies. The intruder moved fast, but Harper was faster. She anticipated every step, preemptively cutting off access points and rerouting control sequences in real time. Then the first confrontation. The intruder reached for the control panel, and Harper's team converged from both directions, silent and precise. The figure spun, weapon raised, but Harper had already calculated the trajectory of their movements. The intercept team neutralized the threat with surgical efficiency, disarming the intruder and securing the device before it could trigger any catastrophic failures. The room exhaled collectively, but Harper knew better than anyone that this was not the conclusion. The external accomplice remained at large, coordinating, observing, and ready to strike again. Every alert, every blinking red line on her tablet was a reminder that the operation was far from over. She tapped a series of commands, locking down the remaining nodes, rerouting sensitive communication feeds, and initiating countermeasure protocols designed to preempt secondary attacks. The Pentagon system stabilized, but the tension was electric. Officers who had doubted her mere presence now followed her directives without hesitation. The general, humbled and awed, could only watch as Harper's calm authority orchestrated a defense that had prevented disaster on multiple fronts. Then came the final escalation, an external signal detected, an encrypted transmission emanating from an unknown location. Harper recognized the signature immediately. This was the accomplice, the mastermind behind the operation, coordinating from afar. Their objective was clear: to exploit any lapse, any hesitation, any miscalculation. "Central Command," Harper said quietly, issuing orders with unwavering precision, "trace that transmission. Activate all counter-surveillance measures. Prepare to neutralize remotely if necessary. Do not underestimate them." Her fingers moved faster than anyone could follow, executing complex algorithms, rerouting power, isolating compromised nodes, and establishing digital traps. Every system in the Pentagon responded in unison, a testament to Harper's foresight and command. The general stepped closer, voice low and uncertain. "Major Lawson, how can you anticipate all of this? How do you see the moves before they happen?" Harper didn't look at him. Her eyes were locked on the main console, scanning for anomalies. "Experience, sir," she said quietly. "Intuition, training, and the knowledge that hesitation equals failure." Suddenly, the transmission intensified, a barrage of data attempting to override Harper's defenses. She identified multiple vectors of attack, each more sophisticated than the last. She initiated a countermeasure, isolating the breach and rerouting control to redundant systems. The intrusion was relentless, adaptive, but Harper was faster, anticipating every move with unerring precision. "Engage countermeasures," she ordered. "Activate lockdown on all vulnerable nodes. Trace origin in real time. Prepare tactical response if necessary." The room moved as one under her guidance. Teams executed flawlessly. Cameras tracked every movement, drones monitored every corridor, and systems responded instantly to Harper's commands. The intruder's transmission was gradually neutralized, redirected, and contained. But Harper knew the danger wasn't over. The accomplice, whoever they were, had demonstrated intelligence, strategy, and ruthlessness beyond anything she had encountered. The operation was not just a breach. It was a full-scale test of her command, her intellect, and her resolve. She pressed a final sequence on the tablet, locking down the building, stabilizing all systems, and securing every potential vulnerability. Every alert turned green, every red line disappeared, and for the first time in hours, the Pentagon systems were fully operational and secure. The room exhaled collectively. Officers leaned back, faces pale, bodies tense but alive. The general finally stepped forward, his face a mixture of awe, respect, and humility. "Major Lawson," he said quietly, voice low, almost reverent, "you've done what no one else could. You've prevented disaster, orchestrated a defense against impossible odds, and commanded with authority beyond your rank. I thank you." Harper's lips pressed into a thin line, her eyes scanning the screens one last time. "Sir, the immediate threats are contained," she said evenly. "But we cannot let our guard down. The operation isn't over. They will strike again, and next time we must be ready before they even move." The general nodded, fully acknowledging her command. In that moment, it was clear. Harper Lawson was not just a major in the Pentagon hierarchy. She was the architect of its defense, the strategist who had outmaneuvered an unseen enemy, and the unyielding force standing between order and chaos. And somewhere beyond the walls of the Pentagon, Harper knew the accomplice was still watching, waiting, planning, calculating their next move. But Harper Lawson was ready. The Pentagon was quiet now, but the silence was not the comfort of peace. It was the tense calm before the storm could return. Major Harper Lawson stood at the center of the operations floor, her eyes scanning the screens, her fingers resting lightly on the tablet, her mind never ceasing. Every anomaly, every alert, every trace of the mole's accomplice was locked in her mental map. This was more than defense. It was anticipation, prediction, and control, all rolled into one unbroken focus. The general stood behind her, a shadow of authority now humbled by Harper's competence. He had witnessed, hour after hour, the impossible, Harper neutralizing internal threats, countering external manipulations, outpacing the mole and their accomplice with near superhuman precision. And yet, he sensed the tension in the room was far from over. Harper's tablet pinged, a subtle but distinct alert. It wasn't a breach of the Pentagon's systems. It was a traceable signal from an outside network, encrypted and cunningly disguised. The accomplice was back, coordinating remotely, testing once more. "Sir," Harper said calmly, without turning, "we have a signal originating outside the Pentagon. They're attempting to manipulate our systems remotely. This is their final phase. I need full authorization to act decisively. No delays." The general's eyes widened. He knew what she meant. This was no longer about protocol. It was about action, authority, and consequences. "You have it," he said quietly. "Do whatever it takes. Take full command." Harper's lips pressed into a thin line. She didn't hesitate. She tapped into the encrypted network, isolating the transmission, rerouting it through secure firewalls, and setting up a digital trap. Every command, every calculation was executed with precision. She anticipated the accomplice's moves even before they could be made. Then the voice came through, distorted but chillingly confident. "You think this ends tonight, Major Lawson. You've only delayed what is inevitable. Surrender control, and perhaps lives can be spared." Harper's eyes narrowed. "Control is not negotiable," she said softly, almost to herself. Then louder she addressed the unseen enemy. "You have underestimated me. I do not negotiate with threats. You adapt, I outmaneuver. You strike, I neutralize. This ends now." With a few precise taps, Harper executed the final countermeasure. The accomplice's system, designed to penetrate, override, and destabilize, was isolated and quarantined. Attempts to reroute or bypass her defenses were immediately detected and blocked. Red alerts turned to green across all consoles. Alarms that had screamed for hours now fell silent. Security teams throughout the building were poised for action, but Harper didn't need them yet. The battle was digital, remote, invisible, but fully under her control. Every trace of the accomplice's manipulations had been traced, identified, and neutralized. The threat was ending on her terms. Minutes passed. Then came the final confirmation. The external signal had been severed, the intrusions nullified, the Pentagon fully secure. Harper exhaled, a slow, deliberate release that carried with it the weight of hours spent in constant tension. The general approached her, voice low and shaken. "Major Lawson, you've done it. You've secured the Pentagon, neutralized threats internal and external, and done it all with precision I've never witnessed. You. Harper turned to him, her expression steady, unflinching. Sir, this was not about rank. This was about command, decisiveness, and foresight. You have the authority, but authority alone doesn't protect lives. Action does. Preparedness does. Command must be exercised with clarity and courage. He nodded slowly, fully understanding the weight of her words. In that moment, the room recognized something fundamental. Harper Lawson was in command, not because of her rank, but because of her skill, intelligence, and unyielding focus under pressure. The officers who had doubted her, who had questioned her audacity, now looked at her with respect and awe. She had led them through a storm of chaos, outmaneuvered a brilliant adversary, and emerged victorious without a single critical failure. But Harper didn't allow herself relief. She knew better. She scanned the logs one last time, verifying every system, every protocol, every potential vulnerability. The accomplice had been contained, but Harper Lawson had learned enough to know that enemies of this caliber did not give up easily. Finally, she allowed herself a small gesture, a deep breath, shoulders relaxing slightly. The tension that had been coiled like a spring within her began to unwind. For the first time in hours, she looked around the operations floor, seeing officers moving with renewed purpose, security teams checking systems with confidence restored. The general's gaze met hers, and in it, she saw acknowledgement, respect, and an unspoken understanding that her command had been absolute. Then, as if on cue, a subtle alert flashed on a secondary console. Harper's eyes immediately locked on it, a minor anomaly, a test signal, nothing dangerous but unmistakably a message from the outside world. Someone was observing, still learning, still calculating. She smiled faintly, a rare human moment in a situation defined by calculation and control. "Let them watch," she said quietly. "We're ready." The general, standing beside her now, allowed a small, almost reluctant smile. "Major Lawson, today, you commanded in a way few ever have. You've redefined what it means to lead in a crisis. I thank you." Harper didn't reply immediately. She turned back to the screens, running a final check, ensuring every system, every protocol, every potential breach was accounted for. Then, she pressed a series of final commands, locking down the building, verifying communications, and ensuring total operational security. The room finally exhaled collectively. Hours of tension, fear, and near catastrophe had culminated in a victory of intellect, strategy, and unshakable calm. Harper Lawson had led where rank alone could not, had commanded where authority without action would have failed, and had emerged as the definitive force standing between order and chaos. As she looked around, her gaze fell on the general, the officers, and the teams who had followed her so flawlessly. She allowed herself one final acknowledgement, a nod, quiet but full of meaning. They had survived this together, but she had led. She had commanded. She had prevailed. And somewhere beyond the walls of the Pentagon, Harper knew the adversary still watched. But for the first time, she allowed herself a quiet certainty. Should they strike again, Harper Lawson would be ready. Always. Because command, decisiveness, and unwavering focus were not granted by rank. They were earned, and she had proven without question that she possessed them in full measure. The Pentagon's lights shone steady now, alarms silent, systems secure. And in the quiet, Major Harper Lawson allowed herself a fleeting thought. The general had once yelled, "Stand down." But in the end, she had been the one actually in command. And nothing, not rank, not fear, not chaos, could ever change that.